So, um, this is going to be something a little bit new on this channel, I guess, in general as well. I could have probably made the camera a lot bigger here, but I'm going to put the emphasis on something else. Um, so today, I'd like to do a little bit of a book review. This is going to be a little historical, I guess, for the book and for me, because this is from something I read a long time ago in the past. And when I first kind of started this channel, one of my goals was to kind of review some old books and just the overall impact they've had. Um, I think as a reader of any genre, it can be really difficult to know kind of where to start when you're starting, but also just what is that book going to mean? Thank you for the follow. What is that book going to mean in, like, say, a year, 10 years, 5 years, so on and so forth? Um, this will probably go on YouTube eventually, but at least for this, I wanted to start by just taking a look at a really early book I read. I actually didn't really get into reading much until probably the fifth grade, but I'll get to that probably at a later time. This is mainly going to start as going through Amazon, because that's where I got a lot of books that I was reading. And the first one of that was one called Young Samurai. So what I envision for this is I want to go through a lot of these old books and also just give kind of an overview, but also what I might remember from it and maybe say any value in reading this book. I've read a lot of books since probably I was around 10 was when I started getting into reading. A lot of fantasy, started as a young adult back then, but now even into sci-fi, um, lots of stuff like that nowadays. I still like reading, still read a lot. I've written a little bit and tried to write, and a lot of this is going to be just kind of my taste, my experience, and just kind of the thoughts involved in that. So starting it off is a series called Young Samurai. This is something that I got into, I believe, when I was around 13. There are 9 books in this series. It's a series by Chris Bradford. A lot of this you can see I'm just kind of providing here. This is kind of like an ad read, but um, essentially we start with Jack, and this is his story from 1611, which I'll talk a little bit the history involved in this, and his experiences learning kind of the blade, um, ninjutsu, I guess you could say, and a lot of other things like that. So the goal here, as I mentioned, is to review the book. So I would say that this book, does it come up every day in my life? No, probably not. But the overall themes that kind of started here, I think, were very impactful. For a book, I think in a young reader, especially for a book to be impactful, there's some element that needs to kind of grasp you in an imaginative kind of way. It wants to grab onto your imagination and let it run wild in some sense. Um, this book, set in Japan, a very long time ago, 1611, I think accomplishes that in the sense that my 13-year-old self, when I was reading through this, was very much transported to, say, that world. And I think this book did a very effective job of setting that up, creating it, um, and also just making it in such a way that it was digestible. It tackled some strong themes. So the first thing I wanted to say is that I think it accomplishes the goal of grabbing you and teleporting you into a different world. Very important for a book like this, and I think it does it very, very effectively. The other thing that I think this book does well is, so the reading age they mentioned is 11 to 15. I was about in the middle of that. Grade level 6 to 10, I was around like normal for that. The page length, pretty good length. I guess if you're worried about going through like how many pages you're getting through, this is 9 books, by the way. And I feel like overall the plot of the story follows a pretty direct route, a pretty sensible route. I don't remember it being especially crazy. There were a few really good twists. I should mention I'm not planning to spoil anything too crazy. This will still be pretty general, but hopefully have some kind of rating at the end. But I won't spoil anything too much. Um, I do remember this book had a pretty good twist. In addition to one of this is later in the series, but in terms of what does it mean to lay your life on the line and what things are kind of worth that having value with. Now, this series does have a little bit of death, um, along with maybe some religious undertones and some other undertones, but I think it approaches them in a very effective way. I think it engages young readers in a way that isn't overwhelming. You also see some very classic tropes. This is a book about, once again, they start mentioning ninja pirates, I believe, um, which we do encounter. We see Jack going through kind of a multitude of different scenarios, kind of getting picked up, taught, and then going off on multiple adventures kind of to achieve his overall goal, I'll say, which I won't spoil. But in this, I feel like we get a very good look at this character. I don't remember him as much of a Mary Sue or, say, an overpowered character. He encounters some setbacks as well that aren't in a very frustrating way. In some of the books we'll talk about in the future, I can think of a few right now where you go to the trope of our character's too strong, let's give them a brain injury so we set them back a few years. This book does not encounter, these books do not encounter that at all. The first book especially is a very good introduction into the story. Um, and provides just a very good overview, I believe, of like what a story should be from start to finish. I felt like the plot was very seamless. The themes that they approached were very effectively told, but also in a story that is so, I guess, sensational in topics. We have ninjas here, we have lots of fighting, we have swordplay. It does it in a way that isn't too cliche, and isn't too, I guess, cringeworthy in a sense. Um, I think the premise here is done very well, in addition to the fact that we get a pretty good ending overall. The story is told effectively, it engages the reader, and overall, I thought it was a very good start for me. I enjoyed kind of having that experience teleported away into 1611 Japan. Um, as far as what I still carry from this, I think the imagination, being able to transport you to another place, is something that as you get older as a reader happens maybe less and less and can be much harder to find those special books that say do it. I have a lot of friends who will reread books, they'll go back to the same ones, people who've read Harry Potter like 10 times. Um, that's something where it's a place of familiarity. For me, I rarely reread books, and I'm kind of constantly on the search for the next one that can kind of drag you in. I felt like this was an early one that did drag me in pretty effectively. It was not the first, it was not the second or third even, but it did a very good job at the kind of place in life I was at. Beyond that, I think there's a very, this is a very goofy thing to mention, but there is a segment in I think book 6 or 7 that talks about dragon breathing when he's involved in some ninja shenanigans, I'll say. My sixth to seventh grade self believed this book. It was a method where you go, I think, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out twice, and then breathe in again, or some order of that. And I would try to do this while running in gym class, like seventh or eighth grade, convinced that this was a way to improve my speed or other things. It's a little goofy, I know, but it was just something kind of fun. I think I Googled it and it said like that could help. The whole idea is I think that you take deeper breath. It doesn't matter. This isn't about running, but essentially it was fun and that did actually stick around with me for a pretty long time as a goofy thing to focus on, and just kind of emphasize breathing. Um, I will say it can't all be fluff. I can run a sub 6 mile, I swear. Um, but just something fun like that. Some of the other, I think the book does a very good job exploring multiple settings. That's something that can be challenging, is you feel like a world has been set up in such a way that it's everything's only happening around the main character and there's nothing else going around in the rest of the world. It's just kind of the main characters in their little bubble and everything's going on. I think the book does a good job of taking our main character and dropping him in new places pretty frequently, honestly. Like each book is almost a new setting in some senses, and having it be an effective story in a new place that doesn't feel, say, like a a movie set almost where everything's fake. Like it feels like the world revolving around is real. I feel like the character interactions as well, I remember them as being pretty effective. Um, but overall, I'd say the main takeaways here were being transported away in some sense, but also the dragon breathing, I guess. It's kind of goofy. But also some of the first introductions you'll see to death as a reader, but also just how to approach that in a way like what meaning does life have? Why do people do the things they do? And so on. The other aspect of this book is that it's set in 1611. So this is a little historical in some senses. I remember my young self did enjoy the history aspects of this. It was fun kind of learning about this stuff and seeing it for the first time in some senses. Say the sword play, the other stuff. Sorry, I keep zooming in on this. But the sword play was interesting. The culture shifts were interesting. All of that stuff was kind of fun to see. Um, and I think played a role in getting me just kind of interested in other cultures as well, but also just history. Like, why was he there is a little bit of the story, what happens to his family, all that kind of stuff. Um, I remember reading, I believe that the author was trying to keep a lot of this historically accurate in some senses. A lot of these characters are not, I don't believe, based on real people, but it does a good job being believable and being fun in some senses too. There's a little goofiness, I'll say, some things that likely aren't real, but it's done in such a way that it really pushes your I'd say your brain in a way to kind of imagine things in a fun way. But I'd say overall, if I was going to rate this anything, once again, this is new, I would say I'd give this around, give it an 8. 8 out of 10 as a book. It was really good. I enjoyed it. Got me kind of started. But yeah, The Way of the Warrior, Young Samurai series, give it an 8 out of 10. Really good story. Um, this may shift as time goes forward. I'm hoping to get a better mic, maybe a better camera, maybe a lot of better stuff. But for a first go at it, maybe I'll make this dark mode too, but whatever. A first go at it, I just wanted this to be a simple review and hopefully kind of a feel for how I got to where I am, I guess, as a reader. Um, if you enjoyed this, please let me know. I hope it was listenable and hopefully give this book a shot, um, especially maybe if you have young kids or if you are younger. I thought this was a very effective book at what it wanted to accomplish.